Let's remind ourselves of Freytag's pyramid, which Freytag developed to analyse the structure of a 5-act play. The first part of the play is what Freytag calls the exposition, in which we learn about the setting, characters, and their relationships. In Act 1, Scene 1, the audience learns that Antonio is a successful Christian merchant whose wealth is invested in trade. His ships are currently all at sea. His friend Bassanio is in love with a rich lady called Portia. Bassanio wants to marry Portia, but first wishes to borrow money to make his lifestyle appropriately lavish in order to impress her. Antonio wants to lend Bassanio the money but has no ready cash because it's all invested in his trading ships. He tells Bassanio that he can borrow money and use Antonio as a guarantor for the debt. Language. From the moment the characters enter, the audience will know that they are of a high social status. This is because they speak in blank verse. Blank verse is iambic pentameter that does not rhyme. Iambic pentameter has lines of 10 syllables with alternating unstressed and stressed syllables. In your copy of the play, blank verse looks like poetry on the page. Blank verse is typically used by upper-class characters and the nobility. For example, Antonio's first 2 lines in the play are, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me, you say it wearies you." Shakespeare often put important words at the end of a line, so here we have the emphasis on the word sad, which sets the tone of the beginning of the play. The rhythm, or meter, of these 2 lines is a perfect example of 5 sets of an unstressed and stressed syllable. In fact, the rhythm is so predictable it's almost monotonous, and Shakespeare deliberately does this to mirror Antonio's mood. He's trapped in a depressed state, and the rhythm of these 2 lines is tightly controlled, implying that he's finding it a challenge to break free of his sadness. If Shakespeare were to use perfect iambic pentameter for every line, however, it would become too much, so he sometimes added syllables, took away syllables, and changed the rhythm to focus the attention of the audience on particular words. For example, when he talks about where all his sadness has come from, he says, "I am to learn." As you can see, this is a very short line, and it emphasises Antonio's apparent bewilderment about why he is sad. The lack of beats also mirrors empty spaces and gaps in his knowledge. Sometimes lines are shared. This is when a character starts a thought and the second character finishes it. A shared line reveals information about the closeness of the relationship between the speakers. For example, they might be in love, plotting, or sharing a secret. An example: Antonio, I hold the world but as the world. Gratiano, a stage where every man must play a part, and mine a sad one. Let me play the fool. The line "and mine a sad one" contains 5 syllables, whilst Bassanio's response, "let me play the fool," also contains 5 syllables, and of course, maths experts out there, 5 plus 5 equals 10, so we have a shared line of iambic pentameter. Shakespeare doesn't use perfect iambic pentameter here. The pace quickens when Bassanio uses 2 unstressed syllables followed by a stressed one when he says, "let me play." The change of pace reveals his passion and determination to cheer Antonio up. At the end of the scene, we see a rhyming couplet when Antonio says, "Where money is, and I no question make, to have it of my trust or for my sake." Remember that in Elizabethan times there was no curtain to drop at the end of an act or scene. For this reason, Shakespeare used a rhyming couplet at the end of every scene to signal to the audience that the scene was ending. Now, the rhyming couplet we've looked at there loosely translates as, "Wherever the money is, I will without question guarantee the loan for you." We can see that it also sums up the scene and foreshadows what will happen next for the audience. Foreshadowing, giving a hint or sign of something that will happen in the future, is a structural technique that Shakespeare uses in this scene. Here, the playwright establishes important information about Antonio's wealth and the dangers of losing it. Shakespeare introduces the information through the minor characters of Salarino and Salanio, who are also wealthy Christian merchants. Commenting on Antonio's depressed state of mind, Salarino says, "Your mind is tossing on the ocean where your argosies overpeer the petty traffickers." In other words, your thoughts are focused on the ocean where your ships look down on little boats. Salarino is trying to encourage his friend Antonio that his huge merchant ships are far superior to other sea vessels. Salanio, however, reinforces the vulnerability of trade ships at sea by saying that if he were in Antonio's place, he would fear misfortune. Through Salarino and Solanio, Shakespeare reveals a vital plot point. Antonio is currently risking his entire wealth on his trading ships. If he loses his ships, he will lose all of his wealth. Shakespeare continues to reinforce this point by reminding the audience how dangerous it can be to have all your wealth in ships. Salarino mentions dangerous rocks that can wreck ships, and of course later in the play it is believed that Antonio's ships are lost at sea. In this opening scene, Shakespeare therefore uses the minor characters of Salarino and Solanio to establish Antonio's situation and foreshadow the loss of the ships, which will lead, of course, to Antonio's trial. In this scene, we meet Bassanio and we learn about his character and motivations. Antonio asks him for an update on the lady and Bassanio's intended pilgrimage to her. The word pilgrimage is a religious word referring to a journey to a sacred destination. This language suggests Bassanio is truly in love. However, Bassanio's reply focuses solely on money. So what do we learn about Bassanio? Well, he's in debt and can't afford to pay the interest on his loans. He wants to get out of debt. He admits that his extravagant lifestyle has led him to his current situation. He feels trapped in debt. He owes Antonio the most, and he has a plan for how to get out of debt. Instead of answering Antonio's question about Portia, the lady, Bassanio focuses solely on money. Indeed, when Antonio asks him to describe Portia, the structure of his reply is equally startling. Bassanio focuses first on her wealth, a lady richly left. Secondly, he describes her fair appearance. And finally, he vaguely describes her character, wondrous virtues. This does not paint a positive picture of Bassanio, who seems only to be interested in money and sex with a beautiful woman. We learn very little of Portia's personality in this speech. Even the references to her looks are intertextual references to wealth. He compares her sunny locks of hair to a golden fleece, and this simile is a reference to the Greek myth of Jason and the Argonauts. In this myth, Jason wanted to take his place as king, and in order to do so, he had to find a magical ram and take its golden fleece. The reference then portrays Portia as the golden fleece, and Bassanio on a journey to claim her. At the time, married women were the legal property of their husbands. Everything they owned also became their husband's property. When he is married to Portia, Bassanio will be, like Jason, king of his domain. This golden fleece simile clearly then portrays the idea that Portia is an object to be possessed. We never discover why Antonio is so sad. Even he claims not to know. I know not why I am so sad. It could be he is melancholy by nature. Alternatively, considering his conversation with Salarino and Solanio, perhaps he's sad because he's worried about all his ships being at sea. He denies this. My merchandise makes me not sad, but how much can we believe him? Salarino and Solanio are fellow merchants, and Antonio might not want to admit his worries to them, despite their efforts to cheer him up. Antonio argues rational business reasons. His business interests are not tied to one ship, not in one bottom trusted, nor to one country, nor to one place, and his entire wealth is not dependent on doing well financially this year, nor is my whole estate upon the fortune of this present year. However, as we will later learn when none of the ships arrive before the repayment of Shylock's loan is due, there is cause to be suspicious about his apparent confidence. Salarino might be more accurate about the cause of Antonio's sadness when he suggests that Antonio is in love. Antonio strenuously denies this, but it is worth exploring further. There is a theory to suggest that Antonio is in love with Bassanio. Of course, he's unable to admit this because a contemporary English audience would know that male homosexuality was punishable by death. Over in Venice, male homosexuality was punished by the Catholic Church, as same-sex relations were regarded as a sin. In 15th century Venice, the punishment was to be burnt at the stake. So if Antonio is sad because he loves Bassanio, he's not going to admit it. Let's examine some possible evidence for Antonio being in love with Bassanio. Firstly, melancholy was traditionally regarded as a symptom of lovesickness in Shakespeare's time. In Shakespeare's day, physician Timothy Bright's Treatise of Melancholy, 1586, stated that sad and fearful humour was a common illness in Elizabethan England, so common in fact that it verged on being fashionable. Although melancholy linked to sadness, Bright claimed that it was also associated with refinement and male intellect. Shakespeare, for example, parodies, that means makes fun of, the languishing lover of Romeo at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. So at the beginning of The Merchant of Venice, we have a fashionably melancholic Antonio, but if he's in love, no woman is mentioned. We see, however, a close relationship with Bassanio in Act 1, Scene 1, when Antonio says, "My purse, my person, my extremest means lie all unlocked to your occasions." This is an ambiguous offer. Literally, he's saying my money, myself, and all that I have are at your disposal, and this could be interpreted as sexual innuendo because it could also mean that his body, my person, is available for Bassanio's pleasure. Does Bassanio feel the same? Well, he tells Antonio, "To you, Antonio, I owe the most in money and in love, and from your love I have a warranty to unburden all my plots." It might therefore appear that Antonio's love is reciprocated. Also, a little later in the scene, Bassanio exclaims, "Oh, my Antonio," and the possessive "my" might reveal more than friendship. However, in Elizabethan times, there were often shows of affection, such as confessions of love, between friends of the same sex. At the time, this was not necessarily an indication of a homoerotic relationship, so Antonio and Bassanio, as two upper-class men, might simply be friends expressing their love in a socially acceptable context of the time. Perhaps it's worth exploring their relationship more by asking the question, why? Why is Antonio prepared to risk his life to help Bassanio? A reminder that Antonio is a good man of business. He has more than one ship in more than one country, so he's spreading his risks. He's already lent money to Bassanio, who's not paid him back. Why would he do this again and put himself in debt in the process by agreeing to guarantee the loan? Remember, there's no financial profit in lending money to Bassanio. Only Jews were allowed to charge interest on loans. If Antonio is in love with Bassanio, this would explain his willingness to help. Not only does Antonio put himself into debt, but he also later risks his life when he agrees to the pound of flesh to help Bassanio, and this is an act of love. Let's revisit Bassanio's behaviour. We've already looked at his protestations of love for Antonio. Bassanio, when introducing the idea of marriage, also makes it very clear that the reason he wants to marry richly left Portia is to pay off his debts. It's a business transaction, nothing to do with love. Remember that Bassanio, upon his own admission, is heavily in debt and has squandered his own fortune to fund his extravagant lifestyle. Moreover, Bassanio hasn't repaid Antonio's first loan, or the loans of his other creditors. In short, Bassanio is a bad business investment, and it therefore seems likely that Antonio's love for Bassanio is the only credible reason for putting himself into debt and risking his own life in order to lend money. Finally, let's revisit the source material for the play, Fiorentina's novella Il Pecorone. In the novella, the lady's maid marries Ansaldo at the end of the play, and Shakespeare could have married Nerissa to Antonio instead of Gratiano. Marrying Antonio would fit the conventions of the genre, so why did Shakespeare change the end of Fiorentina's novel? Why is Antonio still single? Perhaps this is Shakespeare's way of developing consistency with Antonio's character by showing the audience that the Merchant of Venice is not sexually attracted to women. If you found this video useful, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Everything in this video can be found in the second edition of Mr. Bruff's Guide to the Merchant of Venice, which I co-wrote with Kerry Lewis, so pick up a copy through following the links in the description. It contains the complete original text, a line-by-line translation into modern English, and detailed analysis, so there will always be more in the book than you'll find in the video series, so do pick up a copy.